Billy here. Just a touch up for the last video. I forgot some things that should have been included in the various sundry areas that we talked about. First off, I apologize for my pronunciation. I'm terrible. I got to punish myself. Need a little humiliation therapy. I keep saying Telsa. It's Tesla. I know this, but when I'm talking, I mispronounce things horribly. And sometimes I use the wrong word, which is even worse. But you know what I'm talking about. Tesla. And I'm probably not saying it right now either, but it's much closer than Telsa. I don't know why I do that. Anyway, something I forgot to mention that I find fascinating is experiments with vacuum. Vacuum. There's no such thing as a vacuum, as a perfect vacuum. You can reduce the air pressure. You can probably take all the air, what we define as air, you could take all of it out of a chamber. And then you just have atmospheric forces working on it. And we know what those are, don't we? They have vacuum chambers at NASA, I believe. They have several around the world. Oh, different companies have them too for experiments. And they supposedly test their space suits and their spaceship components in a vacuum of space. They have a measurement for what the vacuum is in space. I don't remember even how the measurement works, but it's pretty high. It's like, they measured it in newtons, I think. N9 or negative N9 or something like that. You can look it up. I don't have any idea what it is now I'm talking about it, but it doesn't matter. They know what it is. It's measurable. It's not a perfect vacuum, but it's pretty close. These chambers they build, from what I've read, they get nowhere near that. And one thing they don't do, at least there's no public record of it, or there's no witnesses where they put somebody in a spacesuit and put them in there. Can you imagine a fabric suit with atmospheric pressure, which is many, many, many times more than the negative they say that it's in space? Yeah, it would explode. There's nothing that could hold that kind of pressure. These vacuum chambers they make, some of them have walls that are several feet thick. Reinforced concrete and steel. Steel several inches thick. And then they have a huge vacuum pump that's got shafts this big around on it, hardened the best steel available to pull the air out of it. And they have high horsepower engines and to pull it down to the maximum vacuum that they can achieve. And the limits of this vacuum is it's limited by the chamber and by the pumps. Something's going to break in that pump, or you're going to implode the chamber. If you go high enough, theoretically, that's possible. Really, think about that. I think you get all the air out of it, all the air, at a certain point. And the air that's left in there, I mean, if you can't get it all out, what's left in there is going to be pretty thin. But this thing's still working and working, and it can go to the point where nothing can contain it. It'll implode, or it'll break something on the pump. What are you taking out of there? What is it that just keeps going? It seems like if it got really thin, there'd be less and less to grab. Seems to me like if you could get all the air out, why would it still be pulling? There's nothing in there to pull. There's something in there. It's ether. There's no such thing as a perfect vacuum. There's no such thing as a vacuum. They have a lack of air in some places, and you can test that theory. You go up in the mountains and it's kind of hard to breathe. And you'll get headaches, and you'll be short-winded. Go up in the Hindu Kush. I've been there. Chachacharam. I don't remember the elevation of the place. It's the highest place I've ever been. I lived on Rice Mountain in Colorado at one time. Used to go up to Cripple Creek. Tried to go to Leadville once, but there was a blizzard. It wasn't a very good idea. I'd turn around and go back. Leadville, I think, is the highest city. Might be the highest city in the U.S. People that live there are great athletes. They bring their kids down from the schools in Leadville and compete against people down in the flatlands, like Kansas City, where it's only like 5,000 feet elevation. And those kids oxygenate so well because they're used to not having, they're used to having really thin air. When they drive up to their homes from the grocery store, all the potato chip bags explode. I think it's around 10,000 feet. They're close to it. Kansas City Cripple Creek is over 9,000 feet. You have a normally aspirated car with a carburetor, you have a hell of a time getting up hills with it because there's no power because it can't get enough air. Anyway, just some thoughts. Do your own research about these vacuum chambers and how ridiculously heavy they're built, and yet still they can't get everything out. And I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they can't approach the vacuum that supposedly is in space. That's all kind of fugazi. Oh, memories, where they're stored. Somebody might say, oh, memories are stored up there in this fabric that you're talking about and not in your brain. Why do we observe problems with people having brain injuries? Huh? Tell me that, Uncle Billy. Well, I'll tell you. You get a head injury and get amnesia or whatever. You haven't damaged the memories. What you've damaged is the receiver. It's like a radio. The signal isn't in the radio. The radio just brings it down and translates it into something you can hear. You're like a radio receiver. And your receiver only gets one channel, your channel. Unless you're clairvoyant, then you can kind of peek into other channels a little bit. But you get your channel. And if you get your head damaged, well, that's like the tuner. It kind of discombobulates things and screws up the frequencies and it doesn't work right. So there's that. That's an explanation. I think it's pretty plausible. It's interesting things to think about. I think what scares a lot of people, they don't want to accept this sort of proposition is everything you've done, everything you've said, maybe everything you've thought, every decision you made, everything. It isn't stored in here where it'll eventually just dissolve and rot and disintegrate. It's stored in the fabric of the universe for eternity. That scares the hell out of a lot of people. But if that's reality, you're going to need to deal with it. The good book says that everybody's going to be judged according to their works. The good book says that every idle word, let's see, where is that? Well, just Google it. You need to be careful about what you say because it all goes up there. A lot of the ancients thought that the stars and planets, the constellations, the minor ones, anyway, were arranged and fixed by people's actions. It's kind of a reverse version of astrology. That the movement of the stars and planets in certain times and certain places is fixed by what people are doing and where things are going. It might be true. It may be a recording device. We don't know how things work. Science is blowing a bunch of smoke up your ass. I know that because you can catch them out on a lot of this stuff. And a lot of it's engineered to keep you away from the truth because the people that fund it want a monopoly on the truth and they want to control you. And that's how they do it with information. Kind of like your medical system. Anyway, radio receiver. I like that. I saw a documentary once. A guy in a mental institution, they were studying lobotomies and their effect on people. They were playing fast and loose with lobotomies a long time ago. Your professional medical people, they were experimenting and giving unfortunate people lobotomies against their will to see what would happen. They probably still do. But there was this guy that had a big dent in his head. They did a real crude one, I guess, because he's in a mental institution for violent people. They put him in there because he's going around with a hammer smashing people's skulls because he enjoyed it. I mean, he got off on it as his thing. He liked to talk about it too. He'd get all excited about, I'm from the planet of the head smashes. He had a New York accent. I'm from the planet of the head smashes. And I can't even imitate him. He was just so lit up and on fire remembering him doing that. He liked to feel, he liked the sound. And he snuck up on people and did that till they caught him and put him in the nut house. And then they gave him a lobotomy. How ironic. Anyway, the interviewer was letting him spill, letting him talk about all this, and he's all vibrant even about, how he smashed people's heads. And then the interviewer said, so tell us, what happened to your head? And he's like, shoop. He withdrew into himself and became blank and said, I don't want to talk about it. If you know much about entities, demonic spiritual influence, this is exactly what they do. If you block them or you trap them with logic, they go neutral on you. And the person who's manifesting them kind of goes blank. I've seen it. I've been around that stuff. I'm not an exorcist. I don't know what to think about it. There's a lot of charlatans out there, but there's something to it, I guarantee you. I'm going to put a link down here. Something fascinating. The most realistic one I've seen. It lines up with all the things that I have seen in person. And ironically enough, it's not a Pentecostal. It's not a Catholic. Not even a Christian. This is a Muslim. It's an exorcist. I didn't know such things exist. I stumbled upon this because Sheikh Imran shared it. Somebody was commenting on it. I don't think it was him, though. It was either Sheikh Imran or one of his followers. But there's, I guess it's an imam sitting next to a man and interviewing him. And I don't understand what he's saying, but he's speaking in Arabic. But he's sewing him up with logic, and then he kept repeating a incantation of some sort, or a song praising Allah or whatever. And this guy next to him started doing this body language and these facial expressions. I've seen those. Those are very distinct. They're very, I don't think somebody could imitate them. You watch the guy's hands and his face, and he's flipping out over this guy. He's unrelented, trying to get him to stop. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand praising God, basically, and reciting from the Quran for what it's worth. I'm a Christian. I'm not a Muslim, but these things seem to work. Can a kingdom divided against itself stand? No, but the Spirit of God manifests in a lot of different people outside the official bureaucratically declared church. The church is everywhere. And as I said, there's a lot of Muslims that are not nearly as heretical as Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and some other Protestant sects. So where do you draw the line? You look at the early church, they drew the line way out there because there were groups that they were complaining against, that they were trying to admonish, that were Gnostics and other serious heresies. They didn't kick them out. They didn't excommunicate them. They didn't declare anathema. In the first few centuries of the church, they tried to lead by example and love them and teach them and bring them along. So there is a place for some tolerances, but then you don't let it spoil the real church. I don't think it can. The real church is protected by God. Anyway, there's that. I'm going to put that link down there. You might not want to see this, but, I've seen the real thing in person with people who live on the street, bums, self-proclaimed warlocks that have gotten in a corner. And wandered into churches. I've seen all kinds of stuff, and it's all pretty consistent along with these gestures and these manifestations. It's interesting. I wouldn't focus too much on it, but, you know, you can learn. I've seen some pretty weird stuff. And I saw some weird stuff when I was an outlaw, too. Before I was a Christian, I saw, you know, weird stuff out on the street. There's a reason why people live on the street, too, a lot of times. A very good reason. Can't do much with them. And in mental institutions as well, like our head smasher friend. Science tries to explain it. Oh, we can make drugs to treat it. Well, yeah, you can make drugs that make them so dysfunctional that the entity can't use their body anymore. And same with lobotomies. It frustrates them. It's not the optimal solution, though. Another thing I forgot. When I was a kid, I found this book in a mall about science experiments of, you know, the paranormal, things that can't be explained by science, and experiments that you yourself, young lad, you a young scientist, things that you can do. This book was probably made in the 60s, early 70s, and it was cheap, and it was thin, and it had some neat stuff in it. I bought it, and I've already done some of this stuff. I mean, just through intuition and noticing things. One of the things that I had to do, and I've done this a lot through my life, I still practice it once in a while. Go to a mall or any public place, especially if you can get up on the second story. And there's lots of people going around, and they don't really see you unless they look up, and most of them don't. You just kind of get next to a pillar and watch people. Pick somebody out that's going away from you, especially if they're pretty far off, but you can still see them clearly. They're walking away from you. Pick somebody. A kid, an old man, a woman, anything. Pick them. Now, concentrate on them. Just look at them and wonder about them. I wonder what their life is like. I wonder what their personality is like. What is that person like? And just concentrate on that. You know what will happen almost every time? They're walking away from you, and you're thinking about them. They're walking along, and all of a sudden, they whip around and look right at you. They felt something. They knew somebody's focused on them. How do you explain that with science? Well, you just can't. Yeah, do it sometime. You might not have the same results as me. I don't know. Different people have different energies, I guess. Maybe some people just it doesn't work for them. I've never met anybody that claimed that it didn't. I think anybody could probably do it. But that's pretty strange. I mean, put that in your pipe and smoke it, and let it settle down into your existential philosophy about how things work. We can't understand everything, but we got these little bits and pieces of evidence that tells us there's something else out there besides what science tells us. How does that communication happen? Electromagnetic energy? Really? Static? How does that happen? Something that can't be detected by science. In the ether. It's in the ticker tape. It's a neat way to spend an afternoon. It gets boring after a while. And I've noticed if you do it for a long time, the results kind of diminish. So I think something happens with, this natural projection that you have. Is it wrong? No, just a little exploration of our world. It's interesting. Refuting the lies you've been told. And then I'm going to talk about something. On the path of this, talking about radio receivers. You notice people like to use music to mark their territory. It's a territorial thing. I work in the blue-collar, millwright, construction trash industry. And I've been in these big factories for shutdowns, and they got pipe fitters and fabricators and boiler makers and all kinds of people in the same areas. And, And sometimes they'll be rebuilding the walls or putting offices in places and inside factories, so they'll have sheetrockers and carpenters and stuff there too. And electricians. Oh yeah, the electricians. And they all bring in these boom boxes. Milwaukee Tools and DeWalt Tools. I think all the tool companies make these things now. Hitachi. They all make boom boxes, ghetto blasters, so you can have music on your job site. You know, yeah, it's okay if you're the only one there. But, you know, I might not like your freaking music. And I'm pretty intolerant. I have to think for my job. I have to work things out. I have to design things. There's a lot of design work. Not in everything I do, but I have to think out my job and do it in the right sequence so I don't get in my own way and make things as easy as possible. And I got this music, they call it that, playing at 90 decibels right over here. It's country. That's new country. How do you tell when you're... Well, these are digital, so... You're back in the days of the cassette tapes we used to make fun of. How can you tell when your cassette player's screwed up? Because that's how it sounds all the time. Yeah. My Doors album sounds like that. I know something's wrong with the tape, but your music sounds like that, right? But my music probably sounded like that to them too. I don't know. But you got country over here, new country, and then you got classic rock. Sheetrockers. Ugh. And then over there you got some brothers working and they've got rap or hip hop going. Why do you want to work under conditions like that? You know, and some places ban that, and I thank them for it. You know, I think it would be quite tolerable and quite well for everybody if you had some real good, real classic music playing like Bach or maybe a good opera. It'd drive them crazy at first just because they don't like it, but it has some symmetry and it's conducive to subtle thought. But let's just not have any. That's probably best. Save any conflicts. But I would go and say, hey, I'm going to ask you to turn this down, okay? Because, you know, I'm right in the middle of country, hip-hop, rap, classic rock. You know, just I'm going to go around to everybody and ask them to turn it down because, you know, I don't particularly like that. I don't like any of your music. And I'd be nice about it, and they'd always go passive-aggressive. It didn't matter if it was an electrician, a pipe fitter, a fabricator, a cleaner. They would all go, oh, well, just turn it off then. I was supposed to go, oh, no. No, I don't do that. I go, good idea, kitten. And I'd get them all to shut it off. And a while later, they'd forget or somebody else turn it back on, so it didn't make any difference. But one thing they would do, they'd always leave them going when they went to lunch. Everybody's gone. I don't like fast food. I don't like leaving the plant and going through security and then coming back in. I just bring a brown bag. Now, you'd be surprised how few people do that. People waste so much money. Maybe it's a social thing, but you could be social if everybody brings their brown bag. I mean, this is like here in Russia. Everybody brings something and they put it all together and they share and they have a little community lunch. But I've never seen Americans do that. They all go to McDonald's. But they leave all this stuff going when they leave. It's like it's holding the place for them. It's a territory thing. It's like people, one of the brothers roll up in his Escalade and he's got this stuff booming and he's got the giant bass speakers and amplifiers and you can hear it all over the neighborhood. Yeah, they're marking their territory. It's a territorial thing. No doubt. What is it about the frequencies and the music and the style and the stuff that they put out? It's like flags. It's like emblems. It's symbolism. And each and every one of them can't comprehend somebody not liking it. You don't like it, you're not one of us. You don't like this music? It drives you crazy? Well, good, because you deserve it, because you don't like it like I do. They can't conceive of somebody not liking the same thing that they like. Strange. Is that bigotry? Is that failure of imagination or a lack of empathy? This form of people that don't respect others' feelings? Psychopathy. Like our friend the head smasher. He probably couldn't comprehend why anybody would not like, the feel of a hammer going into some innocent person's skull and the sound it makes and the joy that comes out of it. He derived a lot of pleasure out of that. He probably figures people that don't are defective. It's a big part of criminal thinking. I've been around criminals. I've been around some pretty sophisticated ones. Because they live as outlaws doesn't mean that they think like that. They understood that everybody did. They knew that they were weird and they could laugh at themselves, and it's just their lot, and it's how they roll because they didn't want to be controlled. That's a special kind of outlaw. That's the kind I aspired to be. That's the kind, well, I didn't aspire too hard, so I didn't end up staying in it, but and the whole scene morphed. And I had a religious epiphany, and then I hung out with ex-outlaws that became Christians, and that was fun too. It's pretty interesting. I could tell a million stories about that. I have a few already, but I don't want to tell the same stories over and over again. But I'll tell another one. I ended up helping some people. I didn't join their club. I didn't fly their patch, but I just kind of was an advisor because I've been in the scene for a while, and I was in the real outlaw scene before that. I had charter members of 3 major clubs because I hung out in this place for a long time, then I moved, and I hung out in this place, and then I went to this place. So I had pretty hardcore people, too, that didn't get along with anybody. They offered to sponsor me. I was pretty righteous, and then I became a Christian, and I hung out with other outlaws that didn't think that they had to shave and cut their hair and put themselves in a suit in order to be a Christian. They didn't do the crime and the drugs and the gratuitous violence anymore, or the bullying. This is what it is. This is social, making other people in your subculture conform with the rules. But anyway, I was helping these people, this other Christian group, after I got out of the one I was in because it got really corrupted. And then I saw this new one that formed, and it was corrupting itself too, rapidly. But aside from all that, there's an old bandito. I think he's a charter member that started his own Christian ministry, but he wasn't into the bike ministry type thing. He's in the prison ministry. He's going in and evangelizing prisons, doing prison evangelism, and he was doing some business in Houston. I think he was based out in California at that time. I don't know where he's at now. I had to look him up on the internet. I'm sure he's got a web page. But he called up the prez of this outfit and says, well, I got a few extra days in Houston and I don't like wasting time. I'll set up something in Huntsville and we'll go in. We'll just have a little, day or so that we'll just be there for the prisoners and share the gospel, share testimony, and make connections, talk to people, support them. Oh, okay, great, man. So he rounded a bunch of us up, and I went, about 5 or 6 of us. We met Johnny. We went in, did all the paperwork, security check, got inside. They shut the doors behind us. And then Johnny's like, well, man, something I got to tell you. What? This is a sex offender unit. What? Yeah, he brought us into the perv unit where all the child molesters are. Because we wouldn't have went if he'd have told us. He knew that. I wouldn't have gone. I don't want to be around those people. I don't want to be locked up with them all day. Well, everybody needs to hear the gospel. See, that's the thing. In a prison, they have a chapel, and they have a chaplain. And the homosexuals and the child molesters all monopolize it, and they make it kind of a queer thing. They corrupt it. The other prisoners won't go near it because it's considered that's where the queers hang out. Yeah, that's what they say. And you got your own special kind of queerdom in prisons, too. It's a power relationship thing. It's the same as you have in Afghanistan and Iraq in the general culture. I could tell stories about that, too. I've watched them. But anyway, back to our little excursion into the sex offender unit. So we all just kind of scattered out and sat down. We weren't really going to do anything. And the doors open and the inmates come skipping in, and they're all old guys. Almost all of them are elderly. And they're doing hard time for fondling children. And they were, well, the first one that came in, he's yelling in a loud voice, I know what you're doing. You're fishing for men. I'm going to fish for men when I get out, too. That's their attitude. They're mocking everything. They know all about the gospel. They're around they think it's a joke. It's a platform for them to hang their perversion on. God can save them. Not my job. They already know the gospel. I got tricked into being there. I sat there and didn't talk to anybody for most of the thing. They come up and try to talk to me, and I just, you need to get away from me real fast, buddy. And they know. They understand. They just, they go blank, turn and go away. But the point I'm making is, all of them justify themselves. They can't conceive of anybody not craving what they crave and liking what they like. They really think that you would do that too if you had your head on right and you didn't believe in the spaghetti monster that's watching you. If you didn't believe in some eye in the sky that's watching everything you do, then you would be just like them. So you're a coward. You're not afraid to go for it. That's what they think. They justify themselves that way. They think they're superior. Oh, so most criminals do that. Not all. I just talked about the outlaws that can laugh at themselves. They know they're freaks and they're just trying to survive because they don't want to be controlled. They know the system's corrupt. They don't want to be subject to it. So they break laws and do whatever they want. Some of them live pretty well at it. Some of them get into exploiting other people and making it easy for themselves. And then, well, you're not talking about bikers there. You're talking about, bankers and Congress critters. But these people all think that you would do it too, that everybody would. That's what happened when there's a technology that exacerbates that principle and brings it out in people and societies. It went off. The first major one that we know of historically that there's forensic evidence for is the Kinsley report. I might be butchering that name too. I think it's Kinsley. Was it Alfred Kinsley? He's a freak. And he wrote this scholarly, peer-reviewed book that went out all over America back in the 50s that pretty much said everybody gets weird. Everybody's secretly perverts and everybody's a wife swapper. They put this book out and the media pushed it. The intelligence services for behavioral control, they pushed it. The corporations want to corrupt people so they can sell more products. They pushed it. This is a popular book. You got to read this. It's a really interesting scientific book about American society, the real true truth. And Mr. and Mrs. Suburbia reads it and, oh, I'm shocked. The neighbors, everybody, they're into like all kinds of orgies and wife swapping and stuff like that. That's what Kinsley said. It's just behind the scenes. And so people discussed this book. It was a tool for them. Have you read the Kinsley report? Oh, what do you think of it? And they're looking for a way to justify themselves to do things and try things that they wouldn't normally do, to step outside of Christendom, dismantling and corrupting the Christian society. So, hey man, are you swingers? I'm talking about wife swapping. I mean, people got into that stuff after reading this book, the kind of people that were fooled by it. Kinsley was a weirdo. He should have been called Kinksley. He died of chronic masturbation. That's what kind of guy he was. Talk about obsession. And of course he assumed that everybody's like that. He didn't survey normal Americans. He surveyed people that were in prison for sex crimes and made it as though he surveyed normal Americans. That was the trick in the book. And it did move society towards the sexual revolution. It was engineered just like the hippie movement, just like the phony anti-war movement, just like these phony communist movements now, like Antifa and stuff. They're not communists. They're identity politics freaks. Anyway, the fake left. People justifying themselves, making themselves out to be immoral heroes. You look at Woodstock and what they say about it now, what they started saying about it a few years after it happened. The memory fades a little bit, and they start introducing propaganda to make it into some sort of seminal social movement. It wasn't. It was Melanie. Melanie came out with that song a couple years. She played at Woodstock. She knew what was there. And then a couple years later, she romanticized it with Candles in the Rain. Some came to sing, some came to pray, some came to drive the darkness away. I think everybody came to get really, really ripped on alcohol and drugs and have a grunt in the mud like an animal and make beasts of themselves. That's what they came for. But then 2 years later, they're all saints and martyrs and young people that are changing society by standing up to the man, speaking truth to power. I'm against the war. Yeah, man, and I'm a saint, you know. Some of you guys smoke pot for medicinal reasons and to relax and everything. I'm not being judgy or anything, but if I stayed snockered on beer all the time, you'd probably think that wasn't good. I knew potheads. I knew functional ones and I knew dysfunctional ones. It affects different people differently. I knew a guy that was like the spitting image physically and in his actions of Jeff Spicoli. He's a real hardcore Christian now. Oh, yeah, he shocked everybody. He joined the Marines. What? Spicoli joined the Marines? Yeah. Wow, and he came back all gung-ho, and then in the Marines he got saved and became an evangelist. So all kinds of weird things can happen. Okay, this guy was such a stoner, he's obnoxious. He would just get worse and worse and worse. He'd go to parties, and he'd just start getting so obnoxious that somebody would, okay, I'll do it. And they'd just walk up and pop him in the face or in the head, and he'd go down. He'd just go out. He'd go out like that. He'd just, and wouldn't bother anybody anymore for a while. He got hit in the head a lot. Didn't seem to bother him very much. It just made him a lot quieter. And he's a great guy. You never knew it back then. Oh, he had close friends. They probably saw him in a little better light than I did. I met this dude. I went to a place once, a bunch of people I didn't know too well. There's this guy sitting there. You could see he was just absolutely a burnout. And they said, "Oh, this is Rocket, man." Hi, Rocket. "Hey, Rocket, what's your name?" And you can see the thoughts. I mean, that stuff slows you down so much. It's like, Rocket. You could see they got his attention. He had to think about what they said. He had to come up with a solution. And then he got the solution and was enlightened. And then he said it. And this took about, like 2 minutes. And you could just see the thoughts going across his face. He's so obtuse. Or unobtuse. He's so, so clear. It's too much marijuana. And too much of anything is bad. And all things in moderation aren't really necessarily good. I suppose they can be. Heroin's not. Even though it's perfectly natural. Oh, where am I going now? Oh, that's about it, I guess. I never really cared for downers or pot or body drugs at all. I was more of a head drug freak. I was not passive. I wanted to make stuff happen. And, that's bad too. I stayed ramped up all the time. whiskey and amphetamines. Not all the time, but somebody, I was into agriculture. People passed me a doobie, and I would, if I was stone sober, I would, no thanks. If I was already pretty twisted, it wouldn't really bother me much. I couldn't tell much difference unless it was really good, and then I didn't like it because it'd make me stupid and slow and paranoid, and I didn't like being like that, especially out in public. I've considered it a liability because the public I hung out with was pretty dangerous. You didn't want to relax around them at all. But, yeah, I got pretty twisted on that before, and I really didn't like it at all. I didn't like being around potheads much either, especially at work. I had to work with all kinds of people, tweakers, potheads, and construction trash. You got all kinds of people coming in. It's like, and not in my industry, you don't want a pothead. Now, it's good for some people. I knew some carpenters, finished carpenters and cabinet makers that were potheads, and body men that would just smoke dope all day, and it helped them focus, I guess, because they were really good at what they did. Really good. They can concentrate. They don't have to think of 20 things at once. There's nothing really super dangerous around them. Nothing unexpected, and they can focus on what they're doing and be an artiste. Yeah, that works. Not in my industry, though. You're working with a pothead. You got a big, heavy thing that you got to hold up into position. You got to work it around like a jigsaw puzzle to get it in place, and you get it in there, and the bolts are wrong, okay? The tool crib's right around the corner. Okay, I'm going to hold this heavy thing, and you, Towley, listen, go to the tool room and get me 4 3/8 bolts 1 inch long with nuts, washers, and lock washers, okay? Go. Okay. So he goes, and I'm holding this thing. It's a lot of work getting it back out. I don't want to take it out and set it down. He can handle this, right? He should be back in 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15. 20. This is getting old. It's been 20 minutes. Where's that idiot? Tally! Okay, I'm ready to start working it out and set it down. And then, he comes around the corner, all right. He didn't have anything in his hands. He gets there. You remember those bolts you told me to get? Well, you forgot to tell me what size. Yeah, I had that kind of stuff happen a lot. I don't like potheads very much. I don't like working with them. I run them off. If I'm in a position of power where I can, I fire them. It makes life easier. If I'd have done it myself, I just worked it out and set it down and went and got them, but it would have been done in 10 minutes ago. But, do each his own. I'll have to do one on drugs and their effects and long-term effects and the way that they fool you and everything. That'll be interesting. I've been around that stuff a lot. I never was into it that much. Kind of like Mother's Little Helper. You like the stuff that hops you up and makes you focus like a laser and real quick and makes things happen. Makes things happen. That's the only thing I really liked. But I've been around other stuff. People do body drugs and they're just turned into idiots. It's all a trap. It's all a trick. It's all a deception. And many people that are into it think like criminals. They can't imagine why anybody wouldn't be into it. They're shocked that people think it's bad. What's wrong with them? Anyway, this has been long enough. I think I covered everything, filled in all the gaps. Tesla. Testing. Tesla. 1, 2, 3. No, one of my subscribers reminded me of that. And it's not the first time that happened. And I'm glad she did, because I missed it. I just mispronounce stuff and say the wrong word. But that's okay, because you know what I'm talking about. And you can figure it out, because you're a smart audience. Uncle Billy, signing out.